So yes, this is Stonehenge. The Celts made it for ceremonial purposes, but now it's also known that the Druids, who were the priests of the Celts, used ritualistic instruments. The people have excavated mounds equidistant from the center of Stonehenge in farmers' fields around this amazing arrangement of stones, and found the Druids' remains, their bodies or their bones, and also their instruments for ceremony. So much more is known, but only in the last 30 years, which is amazing because this, group of stones have been there for forever, for thousands of years. It was built in 1500 BC. So it was also used as a calendar. It was predictive of certain events in the calendar year. For instance, the solstices in the sun would rise on a solstice right up through certain areas of the arrangement. So these are circles, circular arrangements of stones that are actually quite, they've been seen in other places throughout the British Isles. This is one of the pyramids, and we also know quite a bit about these architectural amazing feats that were made by the Egyptians, because there've been a lot of discoveries of tombs with a lot of information about the leaders and the rulers of the Egyptians who are buried near or in these tombs often. So the pyramids were built not circular, but with the golden section as a way of devising the architecture. So the golden section is used often in the pyramids in their construction. It is also used, the golden section, in the construction of this building, which was Greek. And this is the Parthenon in Athens. It was built as a temple to worship the goddess Athena. The Parthenon was built in 447 to 432 BC, so it's not as ancient as the other buildings we just saw. But the front of the Parthenon, the architrave and the frieze and the pediment were all designed using the golden section. And this is the golden section. It's a rectangle that can be divided into a square and another rectangle that are the same proportions as the first rectangle. So it keeps repeating, and as it repeats, you could actually make a spiral. And I'm going to be showing you more of that later. This is the Pantheon, which was a temple for all the gods, built in Rome. So this is just predating Christianity, I think. The window at the top, the round window, is called an oculus, and it actually means eye of the gods. So this also functioned as a calendar. As the sun moves through the sky, the light that shines on the inside of the Pantheon tells the time of year and date, etc. So it also functions as a calendar. Many of these early arrangements or edifices functioned as calendars for ancient people. This is also Roman. It is an aqueduct over a river near Nîmes, France. So look at the arrangement of Roman arches used in building this. So there are two sets about the same size, and then there's a set of little ones on top. Interestingly enough, I saw a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is the Marin County Courthouse, which looks a lot like this aqueduct. And I just thought the similarity was kind of amazing. Frank Lloyd Wright took a lot and looked at a lot of old architecture, but he usually didn't give credit to those sources. Things like the gardens at Versailles, how was that designed? You know, with what relationships and proportions in mind? The cast iron grid structure of the Eiffel Tower. How did the architect or the engineer decide on the proportions and how things should diminish in size as they moved upwards? Somehow here, it skips always my lecture, and I'm going to go backwards later. This is also Frank Lloyd Wright. It's the Guggenheim Museum. I was interested in the proportion of this larger part of the spiral to the three underneath. Another Frank Lloyd Wright structure. The proportions, very interesting. Sometimes proportions are more intuitive, like Simon Rodia's structure down in Watts in southern LA. Our Getty Museum here in LA, which was just built in the last 10 years, as you know. This structure depends on one rectangle or one square, and it was built all based on that, the dimensions of that square. I think it was 30 by 30 inches or 32 by 32 inches. I happen to know one of Richard Meyer's right-hand men who helped him or who worked for him, and he told me about this. It's also on the Getty site, the website. So the whole structure was built on that one, based on that one measurement, that one square. This is the Buddhist garden in the Getty Center. And you can see that if you go down to the little tram house at the bottom of when you go up to the Getty Center, there's a tram that takes you up. I'm sure you've all been on it. You can see it explains that the dimensions of that square and how it was used throughout the building. I have a book that I usually bring into class, which describes a lot of these systems that I listed for you. And it's such an excellent book. I don't know how you're going to get a hold of it. Possibly you could go into the Art Center library, or you could order it. It looks like this, and I showed it to you last time. It is called The Power of Limits. On the cover is the golden section, and I read out of it to you last time. So this is a page from that book, and you could see these are little diagrams that he did about music and how they pertain to some of these structures. This page is a description of the 2-to-1 ratio, which was used in how tatami mats are laid out in many Japanese houses and structures, and they're actually used to design the whole house. So the dimensions of the tatami mat actually influence what the dimensions of the house or the dimensions of Japanese structures. And I thought that was really interesting. So I went and took a picture at the Huntington or Descanso, I think it was the Huntington, of this Japanese tea house. And you can see on the floor that there is one and then there are two laid, so they hit up against the one. So it's always 1 to 2, 1 to 2. You can't have 2 to 2, not like this, but like that. How did the Indians do sand paintings? You know, what did they use to determine the proportions and the measurements? Same question about the meanderings that priests drew or monks drew in monasteries in the Middle Ages in Europe. This is called a meandering. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Excellent. I don't want that interfering. I have a lot of, for some reason, when I do this lecture, other things pop up often. These are fractals. Computers generate fractals, and they're chains of numbers that end up kind of making these visual structures as well. chains of non-repetitive numbers. You've heard of fractals. An Indian system that's based on the number 9. This is from this book again. They're called the Vedic squares. Now I want to talk about the fact that humans have often used the measurements of the body, our own body, to determine how things are built and designed. This is a picture of an Egyptian man, and the fist, which was a measurement of their feet, determined a lot of their structures and measurement system. Their fist was bigger than our foot. We have a measurement called the foot, right? So their feet maybe were bigger, it is hypothesized. This is a picture of the Greek chorus figure, or chori figures. And they were used on top of tombs by the Greeks to commemorate different people's lives. What's interesting here to me is that they changed, of course, over the 1,000 years that the Greeks made sculpture. This was called the Archaic period, this was the Classical period, and this is the Hellenistic period. But you notice how more naturalistic things became. This is actually contrapposto, this figure. So they started very stiff and staid looking, and more stylized, and then became more naturalistic, and finally very fluid and kind of plastic, liquid. They call it plastic. But more interestingly, for the purposes of this lecture, the heads became smaller and smaller. So the Greeks had this idea that small heads were beautiful, but it didn't actually represent what the human figure proportions are. So it's thought that the proportions of the human figure are more like the Archaic period figure. So not as the final idea of the Greeks that the head is actually 1/9 the whole figure, 1/9 the proportion, 1/9 the part of the whole figure. So they just decided that. And so that's the idea of human proportion being somewhat subjective, and you can kind of make it up. Leonardo da Vinci and Dürer were interested in the Greeks, and they did a lot of diagramming of Greek sculpture and figures in art. So this is from a book called The Geometry of Design. And somehow this book seems very, for my students, it seems very desirable. I don't know exactly why they love that little book. There are a lot of these diagrams on top of famous art. And I think students like that because somehow over the years, 3 of them have disappeared, and I keep having to buy more of this little book. So it's called The Geometry of Design, and it's in the bibliography that I gave you for this part of the course, Project 5. So this is Leonardo da Vinci's famous drawing, a human figure in a circle. It's very, we've all seen it. So he was really interested in the proportions of the human figure. And yeah, so this book goes into that. And you could do something of your own in terms of putting part of our body into a geometric shape. Le Corbusier, the famous French architect, was interested in the idea of designing for the human figure and doing design that had to do with our movement and gesture. So here we see one of his drawings where he shows people sitting, or the human figure seated, the human figure leaning, the human figure standing, and the human figure reaching. The Fibonacci sequence is actually has a lot to do with the golden section as well, but we see the Fibonacci sequence in nature a great deal. So we might find it in such phenomena as the growth of leaves around a stem, or the growth of a shell spiraling outwards. Another grid that some design teachers at Art Center use that was actually done by Le Corbusier, having to do with the golden section. So this is the golden section, and I have a diagram that shows how to make the golden section, but I have to say again, and I'll probably repeat this throughout my lecture today or several times at least, that I do not want you to reinvent the wheel. It's not what this project is about. It's about finding a diagram of the system that you like and fitting your motif into it and seeing what happens, what image results. You do not have to understand the math. You don't have to be a mathematician in any way to do this final project. So here's the diagram of how to make the golden section. And I will also put these online on your .ed site. So I will put this, I will put how to create a tessellation. I have some instructions for all of these things, but you can also find it online. So with the one that I just showed you, you could find this online and just fit your motif into it. In fact, I want to make a copy of this. I guess I can't just pull it. Well, I could take a screenshot. For later when I'm doing my demo. So in the little book, again, there are these diagrams of things like spiral growth patterns, which are really beautiful things. You can also find that online. Notice that seeds, for instance, in a sunflower or a pine cone grow in this kind of spiraling fashion. And the Fibonacci series. So the Fibonacci series, Fibonacci was an Italian mathematician who discovered this series of numbers, but it is also seen, as I said before, in nature a great deal. And the way you do it is you take the two numbers, starting with 1. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. Then you go backwards. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And you just keep going. People have used that to do this project in a variety of ways, controlling the numbers of motifs that repeat. So the little book has some diagrams showing how people designed using geometric shapes. This is the Volkswagen, which actually I think had somebody at Art Center from Art Center, a student who went to Art Center, had to do with the design of this vehicle. So don't tell me that you can't find anything in regards to your system, because when I looked up, for instance, the Fibonacci numbers, pages and pages of information came up. And this was 2 of the pages that I found look like this. So it might be interesting to read and research which part of the Fibonacci series, how it applies to what you're doing and how you're going to use it. But I don't expect you to understand or to reinvent or to recalculate anything. So going backwards, I think there were some buildings that I didn't include here because they are some examples. So last time we were looking at some examples. I think I showed you some of these. This was a graffiti, and he put it into the golden section, so it actually moves around in a spiral. But this was his final image using a little sprite figure that he drew. This was the Fibonacci series layered from the inside out. The letter A, I think I may have shown you last time, done in a organic spiral. And this was a really beautiful solution. It's actually a script A for those of you who are in graphics, and he simply repeated it in a organic spiral, which you can look up, a natural spiral, and it made this formation. This is the golden section again, spiraling inwards. The motif is this lovely lady with a gun. It was interesting because when she applied her colors, I actually liked this one the best, and it was very simple in terms of color. She did some that were more complex, but I thought the cocktail lounge feeling of this was more effective than the others. This was a barcode. I think I may have shown you some of these already.
Yeah, you did.
It's fun to look at them though.
Mm-hmm.
Many people kind of got into doing mandalas. I think students these days feel that they're relaxing, they're easy to do, but they're fun to do. And they also have a certain sense of spirituality. So I have received quite a few mandalas. Okay, so I'm going to go into now showing you a few of the final projects, examples in other words. And because I think I came up with some that you hadn't seen, and I think it's fun to look at them and also interesting for you. So remember last time I was trying to show you, Jeffrey Sue last semester did these. These were his final pieces. And I think I can open them now. I tried it. I don't know, maybe when I have Zoom open, it's harder, but I'm gonna try one more time because they became so ornate and Victorian. My computer is not revving yet, so that's a good sign. Last time when I got scared just showing it to you because it made the computer overheat. He had trouble too when he tried to print it. So this is one motif that was repeated so that it makes these beautiful patterns. And very, very ornate and complex. But the biggest problem when he did this, we wanted to print it very, very large. And the biggest problem was that it just had so much information. I'm going to open them one at a time. Maybe that'll help. They're just crazy ornate. Can you see it? I think these would be better printed this really, really large. And this was in triadic colors. So 3 different colors, because you're going to do them in a monochromatic color scheme, which is one color, tints and shades of one color, right? We've done that in our color project. And then you're going to do it in a complementary color scheme, which is basically 2 colors. Or you can use tints and shades of those 2 colors, but 2 colors across from each other on the color wheel. And then you're going to do one analogous and one triadic. And the triadic one are those triangles. So you have to go back to your color CMY color wheel and look at that triangle, or the various triangles that we put into that to determine what colors you want to use. But I think this one actually works the best of the ones that he did. And he wanted to put it into sort of a Victorian wallpaper arrangement. Let me show you just so that you can see where this came from. I think I have, oh no, he just gave me his finals. Let's look at one that comes more from, that we could see more of the process. So part A is to make motifs. So let's look at Jeffrey Ding's. These are JPEGs, so I can open them in preview, I think. So he wanted to do a knife, a sushi knife, a very, very sharp Japanese knife. So he started to draw this, and he came up with some ideas of how he wanted this to look. So part B, he wrote an essay just telling us what he was doing, what he wanted to do with it. It was basically a grid that he used. So he also was tessellating it, meaning that it was being put together with itself. So that's why he had to do all those drawings, because he had to figure out how to put the knife with itself with no space in between. This was a very good statement. If you want, I'll email it to you. But he went back to the Latin. He said the word tessera in Latin means a small stone cube. They were used to make up tessellita, the mosaic patterns forming floors and tilings in Roman buildings. Nowadays, the term tessellation has expanded to have at least 4 meanings. Its original meaning of big pictures made from small tiles also means tile-sized, uniformly shaped pictures or big pictures made from tiles that aren't just square-shaped. So he wanted to do a tessellation of this knife. And I'll show you what happened. So here were his first color studies. And I think these were complementary. This is very different than the ones that were more realistic or based on more representational subject matter. And you can't really even see the knife anymore, which I think is interesting. Notice his blends. This was the triadic. This was the monochromatic, which it's almost just, grayscale with a color. I don't think he did this quite right, but it's quite beautiful, I think. And different than if he had been using a more representational image. And then for part D, because he had to do an analogous one as well, I think these were more boring for me. But notice that he included in his studies the color blends that I'm going to show you in the last part of the period today. So this was a analogous blend and another analogous blend. But it was based on the idea of a knife. I mean, the motif of a knife. Whoops. Let's see, let's take one that is more representational for those of you who actually want to draw something that's representational. This is Ivy Nagoyan. Here are her thumbnails, because this will interest you who are illustrators. Notice that she has, these are figures, and they're immigrants. 2 years ago, there was a I think a sort of obsession with the immigrant crisis. Now it's kind of died down a little bit, but people were thinking about climate change and what's going to happen as people move from one country to another country, or to sets of countries that are low, that are going to be flooded by waters, to higher ground, and how that's going to affect the world order. So she drew these. These are all drawn by her. Can you see that? And they're really nice drawings. And then she wanted to tessellate them again or make them in a grid. So she was thinking about how to do that. So these are her drawings for the project. And you can do them in your sketchbooks or wherever you find convenient. But you have to show me them as your motif drawings. So I want to see them. You can now take a picture or however. And then she started to figure out how she wanted, and so she wanted to tessellate, but she wanted it to be more of a composition. So not simply a tessellation, but it was actually going to represent something. So she wanted there to be an image in this. So she tessellated, but this is taking it a step further, as if she was going to use it for a magazine cover or some kind of representational image. This is unusual. People haven't usually done, that's not true. People have done the figure and they've done all sorts of parts of the figure, but not usually an image. She was very specific about what kind of image she wanted to make out of the tessellation. And then she had to do some color studies. So I think I was just asking them to do complementary and analogous. Now we're doing it differently. I told you have to do 4, not 2 for each, but you're going to do 4 different color situations. So this was her complementary blend, and she applied color to the tessellation.
Ooh, that's cool.
And again, her analogous studies. And she was an excellent student, so she tried different things. Notice here that she sort of has this iridescent light blue stroke on the figures. I like this one quite a lot. So I think the one that she went with, that she blew up and printed for her final piece, was the complementary, was one of the complementaries. Her final piece was this one. She had to work with this image because when we printed it, it printed too dark. So she went through several permutations of the same image. And we had to lighten up the area in the front in order to get it to print the way she wanted. It took quite a bit of doing, yeah. But that was her final piece. Nice, huh? So she kind of took this, as I said, a step further because she wanted to make an image of these immigrant figures behind barbed wire. This would have been enough, just the figures. You know, for me, the project I'm asking you to do, it doesn't have to have an organized image. It can just be the motif in a pattern. Let's see if there's any, okay, I'll show you one more that had to do with, it's a mandala, and these are her motifs. So she wanted to do, actually, she wanted, it all came from her studying succulents. And she wanted to make so she studied different succulent plants and came up with some drawings in Illustrator that were very calligraphic. Some were better than others. This one didn't really exist. Okay, and then she put them together in a mandala, and she did quite a bit of extra work for this project, putting things together so that she had some different organizations of her motif. And then we picked the one that I liked, or that she liked the best. So she gave, in her presentation, it was quite interesting because it's all based on the idea of succulents and succulent forms. So I'll read you what she said because the mandala is something that I think interests students quite a bit these days. Historically originating from the Hindu language of Sanskrit, the mandala, translated as container of sacred essence, is based on a circular design meant to represent wholeness of self and community. In regards to spiritual context, it is purposed for meditation and has been widespread across other cultures, such as Celtic knotwork, Tibetan sand paintings, and Navajo medicine circles. The form of the mandala naturally occurring in nature is representative of drought-resistant plants in this particular project, especially in the condition we, as gentrified consumers, have left the land. Fresh green lawns are exceedingly high maintenance, being that they originated in England, a zone of temperate climate consisting of cold winters and mild summers during the 17th and 18th century among nobility. Bringing this lawn fetish into California's dry Mediterranean climate, maintaining green lawns results in a need to guzzle water. So she continues here, basically advocating for getting rid of the lawns and using succulent and native plantings instead. So here are her color studies. These are complementary. I like this one. And this is the analogous. So again, during this time, I wasn't having people do the 4. I keep saying that, but I want you to know that you have to do 4 different ones, not just complementary and analogous. That's quite beautiful. Great. So you can see that there's been real variety of solutions to this project. Another thing is that you can study simply project 5. Let's see. No. To study nature and see what you can find out about some of these things in nature. Recently, I was watching a science channel and I constantly see this project in science. This is a little pufferfish formation. The pufferfish is a tiny little fish, Google it if you want, that makes these amazing sand designs with its I think with its tail and its mouth. And it's in order, I think the males make them to attract females. But look at that. They go about, you can Google it because they show videos of the little pufferfish making these things, and they make these amazing designs in the sand on the bottom of the sea bed. And I couldn't believe it. It was like going at it, you know, just doing this beautiful pattern. And they seem to instinctively make these things. I'll try to find a video for you all next time. So there's a lot of phenomena that animals, some birds make, nests that are incredible to either shelter their young or attract other birds. But this little pufferfish, it's called pufferfish, you can look it up. They have videos of them doing it, and they're scuttling around making these things, and within a couple of hours, this beautiful design is created. How they know how to do it is amazing. They don't, it's instinctual. So I just wanted to show you that. I can't remember what this is, but I think it's an artist's work, and I just thought it was very relevant. I saw it in a gallery, and you know, I was like, "Whoa, there's my project." So I'm going to stop here with examples. Does that give you a little bit more of an idea of what I'm looking for? And you can think about how you could put your motif and what motif of the ones that you've been drawing would work best in the system that you choose.